Welcome back to Suit and Boot, Standing Up in Truth, Transformation, and Breaking Out of Trauma. My name is Tishai Wright, and in this platform, we talk about trauma framework from the viewpoint of Scorpion Eagle to Phoenix. And over the past several episodes, we've talked about roles, and we've talked about specific roles: the scapegoated child, the fixer, the people pleaser. And I specifically talked about the invisibility wound and how that shows up in us, especially when we're going through trauma, especially when we are trying to heal and we're trying to fix ourselves and we're trying to be good people in the world, or, how we were conditioned into these roles, right? And then we also talked about how these roles show up, what they do to our bodies, our relationships, our sense of self. Now, today, I'm closing the loop, and in order to end, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to come back to where it all started. And happy Black History Month, everyone. So now let's talk about the origins of those roles, where they started, how they came about, and how to really close the loop and really break the generational traumas that we've been living in, that we've been existing in. Right? Now, it is important, and with all of these episodes, I've been saying that these roles, these patterns, they didn't start with us. They didn't begin with me. They didn't begin with my sister, and they didn't begin with my mom either. They didn't belong with my grandmother. It goes way, way back. And this is why it's a generational cycle. It's not one generational, two generation, three generations. It goes back to the colonialism. It goes way back, and they began in systems of survival. So when you've been placed, or when you are in a system of survival, for example, you have a parent-child relationship, and that's what we've been talking about on this show, Suit and Boot, for the longest time. The dynamic in the power struggle. It's a submissive, a subservient, a submissive role and a dominant role. And usually we find that in the parent-child relationship, but we also find that in the workplace. We also find that in the home when we have the male-female dynamic. So women have been placed in survival roles for years and years, all women, but specifically for Black women, women of Caribbean descent, women that are descendant from slavery, indentured servitude, and colonial labor systems. Survival was required. Silence, obedience, usefulness, endurance, all of those were required for a woman to survive in those colonial times, in those times when you weren't able to open your mouth, because opening your mouth would lead to something else. We couldn't be as feminine as we needed to be. Softness was dangerous. Emotions were punished, and rest was not rewarded. So early on, women learned to do everything. Nobody was coming to rescue them. Nobody was coming. They learned to cook. They learned to clean. They learned to work, to care for the children, to tend the land, to carry the households. Now, these women in past, they didn't do it because they wanted to compete with the men. They didn't do it because they want to show the other women up. No. They did this for survival, because if they didn't do this, nobody would be doing this. They wouldn't be able to eat. They wouldn't be able to do anything. They would not be able to survive. So this was all survival techniques, and survival teaches through examples. What do I mean by that? Survival systems, they don't teach with conversation. So that's why this entire time I've been talking about how children in the Caribbean system, children should be seen and not heard. They didn't sit down and have conversations with us. They didn't sit down and say, hey, you have a brother, even though I didn't see your mom pregnant. They didn't say to me, what is the impact that's going to have on the family, what I say about that, what I feel about that. So they teach with consequence, Okay. They teach you how not to act, but not how to act. Okay. So when one person is punished publicly, everyone else learns how to behave. That was true on plantations. That was also true in colonial households. And it is true in families. When a child is disciplined in front of the other children, the lesson isn't just correction. The lesson is, this is what happens if you do that. Now, there's not a lot for doing the right thing. That is expected. So you don't get rewarded. You don't get a ticker tape parade for getting an A. You don't get a ticker tape parade for going out and tending to the field. That is your job. That is your requirement. Now, how survival gets transmitted, that's exactly what I've been talking about. It gets transmitted through examples, lessons in punishment. And when survival is taught through example instead of dialogue, comparison becomes inevitable. Not just because people want to compete, but because people want to stay safe. In my family dynamic, I would go to school because I was a book person and I'd get an A. But if my sister didn't get an A, she would get a beating. I would not get a reward like, oh, hey, here is a candy, here's some apple, or whatever it is, just for getting my A. No, 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 no. It was used against my sister because she was expected to get that perfect thing. And over time, stuff like that developed. It developed a sense of jealousy, and that comparison is what that did, you know? And it's not just what I experienced in my family was not simple jealousy. It was more than that. It was more than simple jealousy. It was comparison built into the system. Another example would be as an adult, and they want to condition you to do what they want. So they'll call me up, for example, and say, do you know what your sister did to me? I can't believe I went over to her house and she didn't do this, this, this. Or I can't believe she didn't, made me breakfast when I came to visit, for example. Those statements coming to me, it's not just venting. It is teaching me that I should do it differently, that I should not do that to her, right? She's saying, without saying it, don't do that. Be different. And what I did, I learned that I don't want to be treated how my sister is being treated. So I become the perfect little child. I stay in my place. I start to fix everything. I start to, okay, if I pay attention, if I do everything right, if I continue to get A's, if I continue to behave myself and be a good little girl, mommy won't talk about me like she talked about my sister. So I learned early that I shouldn't do that. I learned early that I should not do certain things. Now, as I'm listening to my mom speak, I know that she wants me to be in compliance. I know that she wants me to do it her way. This is not conscious. It is inherited. Because when you saw the slaves in the field, the good slaves, so the family system it is just, what am I doing here? What is happening? Why is my sister being treated better than me? What is going on? But when my sister sees me getting all this wonderful treatment, or she doesn't see me getting punished the way she sees it, she's looking at me like, oh, she's trying to be better than me. She's trying to be the perfect daughter. She's trying to be a good girl. But me getting the A, it didn't come with protection. It only came with eyes on me. It only came with putting me up on that pedestal without any protection. So this was on a pedestal with no protection, shining the light on me, showing everybody else what I'm doing, and everybody else is my sister, my other siblings. So I just became hyper independent, and I didn't become hyper independent because I wanted to compete with my sister. I didn't become hyper independent because I wanted to compete with the other women, with anybody else. I became hyper independent because I had to. I was prepared. I was capable, self-sufficient, hyper aware, not to be admired, but because I could not rely on the protection. And when survival behaviors are seen, inside a system that already relies on comparison, competence get misread. It gets read as she's trying to be better than me. She's trying to act like she's perfect. She wants to be the good daughter. She's the favorite. Pairedness looks like judgment. Capability looks like superiority, not because it is, but because the system cannot tolerate differentiation. You have to be the same. You have to fall in line. They want my sister and I to perfectly get an A. They want my sister and I to look like two perfect daughters so they could look better. Again, this is not about blame. This is just how everything was built into the system. And this system is a soldier. Everybody is in uniform. Everybody looks the same, but everybody didn't get the same treatment. Even when they fell in line, even when they were hyper vigilant, even when they were doing the things that the family system asked them to do, because this was survival instincts, reaction, just people surviving. Now, this type of behavior didn't start with my generation, with my mom, with my dad. It didn't stop there. It just trickled on and on and on. My grandmother compared her daughters. She spoke about one to the other because that's what her mother did. Not because my grandmother was cruel, not because her mother was cruel, and not because colonialism, all of that, that is what we saw. That is what they saw. And they saw that anyone that spoke out of line got punished. So they didn't want to be punished. My sister didn't want to be punished. My mom didn't want to be punished. So they fell in line with the system. But when her mom did it, her grandmother did it, her great-grandmother did it, and her great-great-great-great-grandmother did it, it wasn't because they were nasty people and they hated their children. No, it's because comparison was the tool. Compliance was the currency. And that pattern, it traveled from grandmother to mother to daughters to nieces. Not because anyone chose it, but because no one interrupted it. Fall in line, be a good soldier, be a good little girl. And that's what I did for many years. I got good grades. I did my homework. But there's a fire that is in all of us, a fire to burn, a fire to change, a fire of individuality. That's what got Kunta Kinte his foot chop off. But in the end, he had to do what was in his heart. He had to finagle. Now, my grandmother, my mother, and my sister, they're not bad people. They're just part of a system that was trickled down. And my grandmother is scapegoated child. She was a fixer at one moment. She was a people pleaser at one moment. We all played these roles because they all had to survive in the system that they were placed in. They all had to work together. Never. Individual survival. And that is how individuals kept safe. Now, let's talk about modern survival or survival in a suit, because that has been happening to me and women, and how that competition is dispelled in the professional realm. Now, in 2023, when my divorce had just begun, I spoke publicly on social media platforms about my pain, about my experiences that I had going on. I didn't call names. I told the truth. And some professional women, including lawyers, some called me. They said to me, Tashai, it doesn't look good that you as a lawyer are saying these things. Mind you, what I heard was not concerned. What I heard was not, I'm looking out for you and I don't want you to lose anything that you've worked hard for. What I heard was conditioning. Contain yourself. Hold it together. Your role requires silence. As if professionalism, as if being a lawyer, as if taking the bar, studying, working myself to the bone meant that I was no longer a human being. And then I thought to myself, why did I get this power? Or why did I go to law school to try to earn to be a lawyer, to know the legal system, if it wasn't to stand up in my truth and use it to stand up for others, and basic to stand up for myself? At the time, I felt attacked. At the time, I felt like I was being dragged through the mud. But now I know they were not attacking me. They were protecting the system they survived inside. Now, professionalism is often just survival with better branding. In the professional realm, especially as women in the professional realm, women of color, we are required to put on a mask, to put on a professional face, to make it seem as though everything is all right. Smile, be pretty, don't change, don't do anything differently, just do what the system says. But how can we follow a system that was never meant for us? That was never meant for us to be in that system. Rooms that were not created for us, systems that were not created for us. What do we do with them? We break them all. We break the chains. We break the silence. And we stand up in truth and transformation. And we break out of all of our traumas. Because if we don't break up our traumas, no one will. And if we don't survive, and if we don't score finagle, this is why competence is misread. Why independence triggers discomfort. Why silence gets rewarded. Why endurance gets praised. This isn't about women being enemies. It's about women being trained inside survival systems. That is inheritance. Women have been pitted for years and years and years. If we're part of one system that we've been conditioned, and another woman is acting outside of that system, we try to put them back in a box. It doesn't make that other woman bad, or it doesn't make her your enemy. It just means that she is not seen yet, that she's part of a system that wasn't meant for her, that wasn't meant for her to thrive in that system. Because you can't thrive in that system of oppression. You have to be the best version of you. Now, I don't blame my family for living in that system that they were raised in, that we were raised in. I don't blame those women that, wanted me to be boxed into the system. I don't blame them, but I refuse to live inside it. Understanding the origin does not trap us. It frees us. It breaks the chain. It takes our shackles off. We honor our ancestors not by repeating pain, but by choosing differently. We honor them by knowing that they died so we could have a choice. Conscious choice, and we're going to choose differently. Now, this is SUITT BOOT, standing up in truth, transformation, and breaking out of trauma. And in this realm, we go from scorpion to eagle to phoenix, because the cycle of life in the trauma framework, we go through that and we need to relive it. And we go from scorpion to eagle to phoenix. And this is where it started, and this is where it ends. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining me. And if these episodes resonated with you, like, comment on YouTube. We're here together. We can do this together. We can break out of the trauma and be the best version of ourselves. We don't all have to be writers, lawyers, doctors. We can be anything that we want to be. It's just the best version of you. Thank you for joining us.